neither Jewish nor Muslim, well, we start saying, look at this. Do we really want our country run where this guy can't control something like this? And it's not a problem that affects the Lib Dems, and it's not a problem that affects the Conservatives. It is a specific problem for Labour. And remember, at the last election, 2019, 71% of Muslims voted Labour. OK? And there are a big number of them, but that is just part of the problem.
And therefore this is the sectarianisation of politics, which Nigel Farage has been warning about.
He has, and actually give credit to Nigel, he spotted it early. Tice was talking about it as well. I am shocked at the speed and the size of it. I cannot see, even once the Middle East, the Hamas war is over, I cannot see Muslims in the UK, from their position now, changing. I don't see them voting Labour.
And Peter, do you think this is a problem for British politics, that it is becoming religiously entrenched in a way that we haven't known outside Northern Ireland?
Well, I'm sure the Labour Party is not seeking to play off Jewish people against Muslim people. It is seeking to strike a human rights principle that applies across the board to everyone, including people who are neither Jewish nor Muslim. With regard to the Hamas-Israel war, I mean, clearly Keir Starmer did make a big mistake in my opinion, not coming out in favour of a ceasefire. By all means, Israel should go after Hamas. They are bad news, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians. They are a dictatorship. Women, LGBT plus people, liberal, progressive people, trade unionists in Gaza get repressed, brutally repressed by the Hamas regime. So Hamas is not anything a movement that anybody should be supporting. I'm appalled that some on the left seem to be giving Hamas a free ride. We need to take a stand against Hamas, but...
Which Keir Starmer has, to give him credit.
Yeah, but that does not justify Israel's disproportionate, excessive, indiscriminate response, where 10,000 children have died. I ask every parent watching this programme, how would you feel if London was bombed and your children were being killed? You would want to fight back against the people doing that. Now, I don't advocate fighting back against, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I do think we have to say Israel must pause. It must fight Hamas, but it must not kill civilians, particularly children.
But a number of Labour supporters seem not to have taken your nuanced view, but to have taken a view that Israel is responsible for genocide, apartheid, and so on, and that is a real problem for Keir Starmer, and indeed for politics generally, if we do move to a more sectarian voting base.
Well, the view that Israel may possibly be committing genocide is the view of the International Court of Justice. It is a very esteemed body of some of the world's most prestigious jurists.
Up to a point, it said that there may be a case. It hasn't actually said that there is a case.
Yes, but it's opened the possibility. It has said that there may be a possible genocide being perpetrated by Israel. Now, let's not call over the word. Just think about the deaths. Over 28,000 civilians, including more than 10,000 children. That is not self-defence. That's not a legitimate response against the criminals who run Hamas.
But they've rejected rescued two hostages within the last week. So if they had a ceasefire, they wouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, more hostages were released, over 100, as a result of negotiations with Hamas. In fact, Israel has killed more hostages than it's released in its reckless military operations. So I would say we want a ceasefire to protect civilians, and we want negotiations to ensure that those hostages are released, and on the basis of a legitimate exchange with Palestinian prisoners as well, many of whom are being held without trial, in detention, under appalling conditions.
Thank you very much. I need to list the candidates standing in the Rochdale by-election. Azhar Ali, Independent; Mark Coleman, Independent; Simon Danchuk, Reform UK; Ian Donaldson, Liberal Democrat; Paul Ellison, Conservative; George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain; Michael Howarth, Independent; William Howarth, Independent; Guy Otten, Green Party; Ravin Rodent Subordna, Official Monster Raving Loony; David Tully, Independent. Thank you very much to my panel. Coming up next, a new report suggests the police need more of your money. But when they spend time harassing Christian preachers, surely this is exactly what they don't need. Plus, earlier today, I caught up with some Christian climate activists, and I'll be revealing what happened.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Labour being unfit for power and this complex question in the by-election of whether Mr Ali is the Labour Party candidate or the independent. I actually think he will appear on the ballot paper as the Labour Party candidate, even though they're no longer endorsing him. But in the Mail Moggs, Brian says Corbynism is alive and well in the Labour Party. If Labour wins, it will come out and Starmer will be gone, which is what happened in the GLC in 1981. Michael says the Tories have not done well, but people can now see that Labour would be worse. They may be ahead now, but they can stumble, and they will. I like that, Michael. We want them to stumble. Harvey says Starmer propped up Corbyn and his distasteful views for years. Leopards do not change their spots. A good biblical reference. Well, earlier today, it emerged that the police harassed a man in Uxbridge after he recited verses of the Bible.
So there is a public
we need to have structure, otherwise you're speaking at the same time.
Well,
right now you're speaking over her.
Right. So I'm saying, is she speaking or are you speaking?
Yes, you do.
We both speaking.
There is an element of
but I'm not
we can
speaking
walk away. We can walk away. Unless we bring the train.
Okay. But as long as you're not preaching over the megaphone.
Obviously, a crime has been committed. We need to investigate. Okay. Or do you want a £100 fine? Okay. Because if you don't want that, we could deal with it in custody.
I'm not trying to be rude. I just want to ask one question.
I think you are, sir, trying to be rude.
Okay. I want to answer the question. Thank you. Thank you, officer. Can I ask you the question? I'm not asking you the question. I'm asking you.
Okay, but you're aware that I can fine you for that.
I'm asking the question. One second.
Who you are.
1 second.
If you do not, I will arrest you for public space protection order breach.
So what were 4 police doing when you can't find a police to go and deal with shoplifting attacks? We revealed yesterday that 40% of violent shoplifting attacks go unattended by the police, and yet suddenly there are 4 of them to make a nuisance of themselves to what seemed to be a perfectly polite street breacher. And there's now a new report from the think tank Onward, which has suggested that a 1% increase in council tax would put more bobbies on the beat. Now, more money always seems to be the answer to every public sector problem. The NHS, the Ministry of Defence and the police all want more of your cash. But until they spend their current resources well, do they deserve it? With me now is one of the authors of Onward's report, Adam Hawksby. Adam, thank you very much for coming in. This is my main question, that you can always say, spend more money and then we'll have more police or more doctors and so on. But if we're not getting productivity from the ones we've already got, is that the right thing to be doing?
So I think it's really important to say that the police at the moment aren't necessarily focused on the things that the public prioritises. You saw the clip there. When you ask members of the public what they want police to be doing, there are three things they say: tackling antisocial behaviour, dealing with drug offences, and dealing with theft and burglary, some of the shoplifting offences you described. And the problem at the moment is that we don't have enough officers in neighbourhood teams dealing with those problems. Now, you're absolutely right. Reallocating officers to those teams is going to be an important thing to do, getting more money out of our investment, and also using more technology. We don't use anywhere near the amount of digital technology, either in the NHS or Ministry of Defence or in the police.
And I read your report, which has lots of sensible suggestions for making community policing better. But what it didn't say is, what are the police currently doing? Because you have this chart on the decline in the charging rates of various theft offences, which we may be able to put up on the screen. That's just gone down and down over the last 10 years. We know they're absolutely useless at investigating or doing anything about online fraud, which has been going up and up. What are they spending their time doing?
So the majority of police officers have gone to two areas. One of them is in response, so that's responding to 999 calls.
But they don't respond, because if you're a shoplifter,
response rates. Well, actually, in the last few years, response rates across the board have gone up. They've improved after the 20,000 officers were recruited by a Conservative government. But what you haven't seen is an increase in response rates for some of those frontline offences. Shoplifting is one. Antisocial behaviour up by a fifth in the last 10 years.
So what are they responding to? Street preachers? Because there were 4 of them there. That's the other thing. You get these enormous overreactions. We had a lady on who was silently praying near an abortion clinic, and a whole van load of police turned out. Well, she wasn't some sort of 20-stone thug. She was a gentle lady. She didn't need that number of police turning up.
So the majority of police officers have been reassigned either to those response teams or to specialist teams. And actually, where we've seen police officers assigned to things like drug trafficking or serious organised crime, those things have seen reductions. The problem is that those reductions in very serious kind of violent or organised offences haven't translated to the public feeling safer. And the Home Secretary's talked about this quite a lot.
And that's quite interesting, because if crime is going down, which the figures seem to show it is, then you should actually need fewer police rather than more police.
You should, absolutely. And what you should be able to do is deploy those police officers locally, so they build relationships with people. We all know that where there's a regular police officer, where they're a full officer or PCSO, who understand the area, they see antisocial behaviour, they might know the school they came from, they know their parents, and they can solve it.
And you had some very interesting figures in Wales about the decline in street crime where they had PCSOs on the beat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the evidence around PCSOs is really clear. What the public want, and they do want things like tougher sentencing, and they want faster 999 response rates, but the number one thing they want is more visible police on the streets. And 10 years ago, 1 in 4 people said they'd seen a patrol in the last week. Now that figure's 1 in 10. So that's why we think you need that additional injection of funds to get more officers.
But why do you need the extra money? Surely it's the redeployment that you need, because, as you say, crime is going down. Are the police still too much tied behind their desks? Is the failure to use technology a major part of this, failure to improve productivity? And it's not as if they're charging lots of people, because the charge rates have been going down.
Sure. So it's a both and. So you can absolutely have those improvements in productivity, and you should. There's an organisation called Blue Light Commercial whose specific job is to find these efficiencies, make sure that every force isn't buying light bulbs from the same place. So that stuff absolutely needs to happen. But the challenge is that numbers of police and police community support officers, PCSOs, are down about half in the last 10 years. And so the problem is that we stripped a lot of these inefficiencies out during the early 2010s as part of the move to austerity. Some of that was good. It meant the force is more efficient. We've now got to correct slightly because we're not seeing enough neighbourhood officers on the front line.
But the formal police, the Police Federation, don't like the PCSOs very much, do they? Because they think their bob is on the cheap. But you're saying we should have some bobbies on the cheap.
I think there are mixed views among officers, and Baroness Casey did a review 10, 15 years ago, and she found that where PCSOs are used well, she described these junior enforcer roles or these bridge builder roles, the sort of relationships I described to you, then they're really welcomed. The problem is when PCSOs are used in inappropriate ways in some of those specialist teams or to respond to 999 calls.
And the sort of final issue is that there does seem to be a decline in public confidence in the police. I think you've got that in your report.
Yeah.
Is that the time to be giving them more money? Don't they have to regain trust first, and then, having regained trust and reallocated resources, come back and say, well, actually, we need more money, rather than getting more money in first?
Yeah, I hear that. And there have been some big national incidents that have meant that the confidence in police is really knocked. But the important thing, Conservative government introduced police and crime commissioners as locally responsible and locally elected individuals. Now, when we're talking about council tax and preset rates, it's them that make the decision and it's them that should be accountable. So whether they're a Conservative or Labour PCC, if they go to their electorate and say, I want more officers on the street and you can hold me to account for how that money is spent, I think that's the right way to do it, instead of Westminster telling them what to do.
Except in the PCC elections in May, people will vote on national issues.
I don't think that's actually true. So in the West Midlands, you saw Andy Street get elected as a Conservative
Andy Street
mayor.
is an exception.
You've got a Labour PCC and a Conservative mayor. There are lots of examples of people splitting their ballots on PCC elections or council elections. And I think we've got to give the electorate credit that they can see who they want to vote for when it comes to policing and who they might want to vote for on other issues.
Well, I'm afraid I shall never vote for tax increases. But thank you very much. News figures have also suggested the violent attacks against shop workers are up by 50% over the last year, with roughly 1,300 attacks. And with me now is Shabnam Chowdhury, the former Detective Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police. Thank you very much for joining me. 1,300 attacks on shop workers. This is quite a worry, isn't it?
Yes, good evening, Jacob. Yeah, it's a huge amount. It's a 50% increase, as I understand it, within the last year or so. So significant numbers, significant assaults, and unfortunately not a huge amount that's being done in order to prevent it. There have been some projects by policing across the UK. You've got Project Pegasus, and then you've got the Police Retail Crime Action Plan. But I think it's going to need a lot more than that in order to reduce those attacks, and also some collaboration and some ownership from many of the retail stores that are having some of these issues.
OK, well, one of the things we've been discussing is the presence of police on the streets. Do you think the presence of police on the streets actually will reduce this type of attack? Because if they're in the high street, then people may be less likely to assault shop workers.
Yeah, without a doubt. If you've got increased police visibility with officers on the beat in uniform in those particular crime hotspots, then it does definitely have it's a deterrent for sure, because shoplifters are less likely to go into those shops because they know they're going to get caught, albeit the outcomes when they are caught isn't great. But the fact is it does prevent them from going into certain shops. They'll go and find somewhere else where the opportunity is much easier and their escape is far better from them. But you've got to have the resources in order to be able to deploy them onto the front line. And I think that's some of the challenges that faces policing at the moment, along with the demand for priority crimes elsewhere, such as violence against women and girls, critical incidents, knife crime. All these kind of offences will take a priority over somebody who calls that there's a shoplifter. But as I say, this Police Retail Crime Action Plan, what they're doing at the moment is the police have given a pledge that if there has been an assault or a suspect has been detained, then they will try and attend as soon as possible.
So is this a matter of policing priorities? When you were a serving police officer, was this something you thought was a priority and you needed to devote resources to? Or was it something that was seen as not being a major problem and has now come to the fore as the rates have gone up?
I don't think it was as big a problem when I was policing. It certainly has increased in the last few years, certainly since COVID. I know the assaults have increased during that time. But I think what happens is when you've got a significant number of neighbourhood police officers, for example, and you've got what you call town centre teams, all these teams have basically just been disbanded. And it was those kind of teams, the town centre team, the neighbourhood police officers who were deployed to those particular areas to deal with what you call antisocial behaviour. So a along with shoplifting, you'd have vehicle crime, you'd have criminal damage, you'd have crimes that affect the local community that would generally get policed, and that police officers could actually police those areas. And I think that's the challenges that policing have. They just don't have the resources. That in itself is not an excuse not to go out and deal with such offences, because these are serious, and something far more serious is going to have to happen before the government or, you know, the Home Office actually take note. And as I say,
sorry to interrupt, but is there an issue that the police don't focus on low-level crime and therefore it escalates, so that the failure to respond to shoplifting, that people feeling that shoplifting up to £200 has been almost decriminalised, means that people commit worse crimes, and that this is something that we've learned over decades, that the broken window approach, that you need to be dealing with the small-level crime, and that helps reduce higher-level crime?
Absolutely, and you need to be able to deal with low-level crime that affect the community, that has huge traumatic impact on them, that has huge impact on the smaller businesses. When you've got businesses like John Lewis, who are paying £600,000 into this project Pegasus, so that they got better digital cameras to be able to, you know, facial recognition, that's what I was looking for, then it still doesn't make any difference to smaller businesses, because the smaller businesses can't afford that kind of money. So they're the ones that are affected. They're the ones that are then subjected to assault, more thefts taking place. So
brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Shabnam. Thank you for joining me this evening. Coming up, it's not been an easy day for the Home Office. That must be a phrase one can often read out, after revelations that the department pays for 16,000 properties for migrants using your money. And don't forget, we'll be bringing you up to date with what I got up to this afternoon with some climate justice Christian protesters outside the...
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, you know, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, you know, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals. We've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is you know, part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, you know, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. You know, there'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We've been discussing police wasting time and wanting more money, and you've been sending in trenchant views. Alan says, on shoplifting, I can honestly say that the police in our county, Lincolnshire, have a zero understanding of law enforcement. I moved here from London 25 years ago and have not even had a response after reporting an issue. Incidentally, wonderful programme. Alan, you may send in mail mogs all the time. Mary says, the police are not being effective. They are focusing on the wrong things, hounding motorists, hunting thought crime, overreacting to trivial things. At the same time, they ignore antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, burglary and much more. We accept policing by consent, but the consent will evaporate unless they change their tune. And another Alan says, police should not be arresting Christian people preaching in public. For years, eccentrics have been walking around with boards predicting that the end is nigh. They don't need more money, just better police officers. I think the Conservatives used to say that the end is nigh, but we spelt it differently. That is an obscure late 1940s joke. For the record, you may remember a few months ago when 3 pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested after wearing pictures of paragliders on their coats, which appeared to suggest an endorsement of the brutal Hamas terrorists that had recently broken into Israel and massacred 1,200 Israelis. Well, it is interesting that these 3 protesters were sentenced today and handed a 12-month conditional discharge, which is hardly a slap on the wrist, with the judge opting not to punish the defendants in any proper way. We thought there were some very interesting questions about this judge, one Tanwir Ikram, CBE, commander of the most excellent order of the British Empire. It emerged he liked a post on LinkedIn that read, "Free Palestine to the Israel terrorist, both in the UK, the US and, of course, Israel. You can run, you can bomb, but you cannot hide justice." Well, GB News asked the judge in question. He's not really a judge. He's a district judge, which used to be called a stipendiary magistrate, and judge is an over-promoted title of a Blairite kind, came in 2000. So we reached out to the stipendiary magistrate in question, and a press officer of the Courts and Tribunals Judiciary has spoken to the judge and said it was a genuine mistake and he did not know he had liked the post. Well, with me now is my panel, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and veteran human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell. So, Kelvin, put yourself in the position of a magistrate.
Beyond shocking.
And somebody comes in front of you and says, that post was liked, but I didn't mean to do it. Mm-hmm. Would you believe that, or would you think that was stretching credulity?
He's saying this because he's in deep doo-doo. A lot of people felt very angry about those ladies being freed, one of whom, according to the Daily Mail, actually had fled Gaza because she didn't like Hamas, and then this is the way she repays her new homeland. That judge puts a question mark against almost every judge in the country now, who must be saying to themselves, why on earth would he do that? And he would only do that, I presume, because he believed it. He now turns round when he has this spotlight put on him in exactly the same way as our friend Mr. Ali in Rochdale, when, thanks to the Mail on Sunday, they poured the spotlight on what he said. He then turns around and said, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't mean it. This guy says, I didn't understand what like really looked like. What a ridiculous suggestion. I'm appalled at this judge, because what it means that almost every judge everywhere now will be saying, why did he do that?
But Peter, people do make mistakes. He could have made an honest mistake. Is it likely?
It's probably stretching it, but I think we do have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But the overall
You're a very kind man.
The overall principle is that judges have to be politically neutral. You know, we cannot have the justice system run by people with particular points of political view where it may influence their judgment in cases like this. Judges have to be neutral.
And I also think it's a mistake, and I mentioned it in the introduction, to have changed the title of stipendiary magistrates, because you knew a magistrate was of a lower standing than a judge. A judge is a title for somebody who is very senior and very experienced. And Kelvin's point that this has undermined judges is quite worrying, because we don't want to undermine judges.
The other question is, how many other judges have this kind of view, right? I mean, I just don't know anymore. There is a lot about our society involving religion coming into it, which I find extremely puzzling and I find very upsetting. And I don't believe that judge should be allowed to sit in judgment of anybody under any circumstances until this is fully resolved. And I don't quite agree with you about the stipendiary magistrate.
Okay.
They are in my experience of covering courts, hugely intelligent and sit above lay magistrates. These are people who have a substantive legal knowledge, and he has to explain how he made the mistake. What is it he thought he was doing when he clicked it? What was he doing? Was this something else he should have clicked, which said he's upset about car insurance prices going up? It's nonsense.
It is possible to make mistakes online, isn't it?
It is possible. What? When you come from his background and this thought process? I don't think so. I don't know. Let him come on your show and explain to people who are very agitated, because lots of people didn't like that judgment either. That judgment, these people had horrendous things as photographs, and all they got was
conditional discharge is nothing.
It is nothing. It is nothing, and he made it quite clear he didn't want it to be anything either.
All right. Well, I think Peter's point that he may have made an honest mistake is something that in charity one should consider, at any rate. The Rwanda bill continues to be thrown about in the House of Lords, with a report just a few days ago suggesting that it was, quote, incompatible with human rights law. Yet another reminder why we must make the Rwanda bill work has emerged. The Home Office has amassed a portfolio of 16,000 properties to house migrants using your money. The contractors working for the Home Office have been offering landlords 5-year deals at full market rates, again, all funded by you. In total, housing migrants costs a fortune. So, back to my panel. Peter, if we don't control our borders, we will have to do this. We can't let people live nowhere.
Well, keeping people in hostels or hotels is costing about £150 a day. Under this scheme, the cost will be reduced to £30 a day. So that is, you work it out, that's a huge reduction, a huge saving to the taxpayer. So the principle is good, but the big underlying issue is we should allow people who make asylum claims to work and earn their own upkeep and pay for their own accommodation while their claims are being processed, as exists in other countries. You know, keeping them on state subsidies in terms of benefits and housing at the taxpayer expense doesn't make sense, because many of them have the skills we need. And then the other issue is, of course, we need to build more houses. You know, there is a housing crisis, and it's very unfair for young people, young families who are trying to find accommodation, that they get priced out because these houses are taken off the market.
I absolutely agree with you on that. But on the first point, if you allow people to come here to work, doesn't that act as even more of a draw for people who are coming here illegally, that they then see that there is a big financial reward and it encourages the economic migrant aspect of migration?
Well, except that if their asylum claim is not upheld, then they get deported.
But we're hopeless at that. So we've got to stop them coming in the first place because we're so bad at deporting people.
Well, we need to invest more to get more caseworkers to expedite the cases. It's ridiculous that people sometimes wait for months, even years, to have their asylum cases heard. Fast track. More Home Office caseworkers to get these people through the system to decide if they're genuine, keep them. If they're not, out.
Come on, let's have more civil servants.
Okay,
that's the answer.
yes, we must remember to do that, if we can find any of them who do a day's work, by the way. So there are a couple of issues there. First of all, is the issue that it affects the indigenous people, of our country, who are paying, I know, all right, it's a shocking admission, I'm a landlord myself, So they are paying very high amounts because there is literally no... So if I put a place out there, I'm swamped by people, currently, by the way. And so the rates are through the roof and have been going through the roof literally for the last 3 to 5 years, entirely in line with the increase of people coming to our country. So I do accept what Peter says, that it is cheaper. What I don't accept is the idea, which is your solution to this, which is effectively to allow people to come here. I can't imagine every war in Africa, every war in the Middle East, every problem that there is in North Korea, suddenly we are going to find literally, instead of it being tens of thousands, I could see literally millions of people coming to a Western liberal nation. You know, I can't imagine. So I buy one half of your argument, but not the other.
I don't agree with open borders. I think we have to have our borders. We have to keep them secure.
We're going to...
Those who are genuine, let them in while their claims are being assessed. Those who are not genuine, kick them out.
My most pugnacious panel are continuing, but I have to stop them because coming up, the moment I came across some Christian climate activists earlier this afternoon.
On Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, Labour in free fall. Has Keir Starmer been found out? Their lead is slashed to 12 points. A special dispatch from ex-immigration minister Robert Jenrick from the US southern border. A stark warning to the world on illegal immigration. And if a pro-Palestine mob turned up outside your home, would you do the same as Tory MP Jonathan Gullis?
Anyone in my community can challenge me, but if you dare come near my house, believe me, if the police aren't going to take action, I'll take action into my own hands.
Don't miss Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm here in Parliament Square, where perhaps one of the most peaceful, best-mannered protests is taking place. It's organised by a Christian group who are going to be here for 240 hours praying to stop climate change, to oppose fossil fuels. And I've come to see what's happening, what they're concerned about. My view is that we can't afford to be cold and poor, that we are going to need fossil fuels, that these are essential for our prosperity, our well-being and our standard of living. But I understand that people disagree, and this shows how civilized disagreement and political discourse can be in this country, and this was particularly true when I spoke to Melanie earlier.
We're here because we, as a group of Christian organisations, there are about 12 of us, ranging from Christian Aid through activist groups like Christian Climate Action. I want to pray for action on the climate crisis. We think that this is an existential threat facing not just humanity, but the creation. As people of faith, we think that's really important, that we recognise that this is something that God loved and that we're causing a lot of damage to it, and we need action.
And you're going to be here for 240 hours, is that right? Will you be here solidly, or will you be allowed some breaks and able to go home in between times? Is it there'll be somebody here for 240 hours rather than individuals having to stay for the whole time?
It's a rota system, and anyone can come and join us on this rota and come and pray with us. The overnight slots, we've got people spending 7 hours outside, just continuing that prayer 24/7. But otherwise, people, churches, organisations, they're all coming down for 5 minutes, for an hour, for 2 hours, just to join us. And we've invited all 650 MPs to join us. And we've also issued the invitation now, I think, to the House of Lords. And we hope people will come and feel the power of what that weight of humanity and our need for something.
And what do you want to see by the end of this 240-hour period?
Well, we'd like the government to start to think about what they should do. I mean, I personally think that no more fossil fuels is the first start in this. I think most of the people who are assembled here will probably agree with that. Now, I know that you think that fossil fuels are a necessary step. And I think we have some things to be grateful to fossil fuels for in the past, but the time has come to move away from that and move away from them really rapidly. So we hope that the government will take that on board. We also think that the UK historically has an enormous role to play in what the crisis that has come about in this country because of the way that we brought the Industrial Revolution, the lots of political and historical things. So we think we should offer that hand of friendship to people in very climate vulnerable countries. It's really important that we offer climate finance to the UN's Loss and Damage Fund and in any other way, but also that we offer our technology and our knowledge to these countries. I actually grew up in islands in the Pacific that are going under. And those islands desperately need our help. They were part of the Commonwealth, and we can't even stop to take stock of what's happening to them in the political rhetoric that we've got going now. I think that is just devastating, and it's deeply at odds with my faith.
Thank you very much. Would you plan to be here for?
Well, to the very end. As you know, the climate crisis at the moment, we're at a critical point. If you see Australia at the moment, wildfires are absolutely out of order. I believe that this government is doing absolutely nothing about the climate crisis. We need to tackle our emergencies and use renewable energy. I recently went to the Philippines and I just came back, and the way the plastic waste, it's just unbearable, and the poverty out there is really high, and we need to do something as a world and all nations to cope and get ourselves together and tackle this climate crisis together, and hopefully generations will able to have a green future.
Okay, and you think this is important, obviously, but there are difficult decisions to make, different choices, aren't there? Because to get to the Philippines, I assume you flew, and that would have created emissions. So how do you balance those contradictions?
Oh yes, you know, it is very difficult to get into a 0% carbon footprint, but if we were to do that, we have to go back to Middle Ages. However, if we use renewable energy, we can tackle that.
I assume you don't want to go back to the Middle Ages?
No, because if we do, can you imagine?
Thank you both very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Bye.
Well,
I admire them, even if I disagree with them. Some bad news for the romantics. Today is not Valentine's Day. The commemoration at Low Mass is cancelled because it's Ash Wednesday and a day of fasting of abstinence. So if you've forgotten to send a card, you're in the clear. You've got a good excuse. But that's all from me. Up next is Patrick Christie's. I hope you didn't send any cards, even to Emily, as it's not Valentine's Day.
I did. Look, shocking Keir Starmer revelations, questions over the judge in the Palestine protest, and a Robert Jemrick exclusive. Don't miss it.
Well, that's it. I'm back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. The weather in Somerset will be gorgeous. As always, Semper Iadem, as Elizabeth I used to say.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There'll be further rain to come on Thursday for many of us. It'll be another mild and cloudy day as well. We've got very mild air that's moved up from the south, and that'll be pushing north through the evening, bringing many of us another mild night tonight. However, there's still a lot of rain to come from the south and west as well. That rain will push across parts of Northern Ireland, many areas of Wales, Northern England, and then it will persist across many areas of Scotland throughout Thursday morning. Further south of that, across more central and southern areas of England, it will be drier by the morning, but there'll still be some drizzly rain and some low cloud across the hills and across the coast as well. So another murky start to the day, but another very mild start. The rain will turn quite persistent through Thursday, particularly across southwestern Scotland, but also in the afternoon across South Wales, as well as the parts of the southwest of England too. There's rain warnings in force here, so there could be some travel disruption and water on the roads in these areas. In the south and east, though, we escape the rain through much of the day, and it will be a very mild day. Could reach 17 degrees if we do get any sunshine. The rain clears to the east through Friday morning, leaving many of us with a much drier and better day. Some sunny spells, particularly for more central areas of England and Wales, and temperatures climbing towards 15 or 16 degrees once again. Staying mild on the weekend, however, there is some further rain to come, particularly through Saturday night and into Sunday. That's all for now. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, week